So we'll just get straight in. If you guys could introduce yourselves, a little bit about what you do, what organisations you're in. Let you take it away, Jayne.
Fabulous, thank you very much, Amber. So my name's Jayne Cartwright. I am the founder of the charity retail consultancy, which I set up 12 years ago. And we help charities do brilliant things and be their sort of brilliant best, I suppose, and try to be their critical friend. I have worked with the Charity Retail Association. They're our partners for all the learning that we offer, which is called charityretailearning.com. And they are a brilliant resource. So for anybody who's interested in the charity retail sector, head over to the Charity Retail Association. I started in the sector at 21. I managed an Oxfam shop, and then went on and have had my whole career working in the sector, from manager to retail director and everything in between. And it's a brilliant sector to be part of. So thanks for inviting me.
Oh no, thank you so much. The Charity Retail Association are actually one of our sponsors, so it's amazing you're here. Thank you. What about yourself, Ronan?
Yeah, I'm Ronan. I'm one of the founders of Thriftify. So I'm from Dublin, but I moved to London just over a year ago. And we started Thriftify in 2018. So as a kind of an avid charity shop lover, my biggest pain was having to spend hours and hours in charity shops, and it was kind of the time when, I don't know if you remember that like year where everybody stopped calling the takeaway and you just order it on your phone. It was like around that time, and I thought, why haven't I able to do this for charity shops? So we set up an app which is used by charity shops to upload their items for sale online, and empowers the full kind of technical e-commerce journey that they need to go on. But then shoppers can just come on and see everything in all the charity shops. So we set it up in 2018 in Ireland, myself and two others, Raheel and Timur, and then Emily joined a few months later. And we now work with 95% of the charity shops in Ireland. And we have a team of 31 people. And we launched in Britain just over a year ago. And as of last week, thanks to the Charity Retail Association conference, where we've met the sector here for the first time, we now have more charity retailers signed up in Britain than we do in Ireland. And I guess, yeah, as Jayne said, it's an absolutely amazing sector to be a part of, because if we can enable charity shops to be really successful online, we can completely turn the fashion industry on its head and turn it from a horrible... at this stage, the knowledge that we have, the fashion industry is conducting crimes against humanity, right? And we can completely flip that and put all the money into charity and to good causes. So it's a really exciting time.
Oh, amazing. It's amazing the work you do. Obviously, Thriftify are sponsor too, so we're really pleased to have you guys here. So waste is such a big problem in fashion, like locally, from sort of council collections and what they do, discarding our textiles, to globally, exports into deserts and everything. I did see a stat recently that says the average person throws away 11 kilograms of textiles every year. To me that feels like quite a lot, but I am a hoarder. But if you sort of add that up to how many people there are in the UK, it does add up to quite a bit. So what do you both think the problem is? What is the problem? Why is there so much waste? Ronan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's overproduction. We have a situation where we're producing too much stuff. And I think some of the challenges that we face is we talk about people making good choices and supporting good causes. But unless we address production, it doesn't matter even if we recycle everything, and even if everything is made sustainably. At the moment we're producing 100 billion garments a year, so it's overproduction, and the reason it's overproduction is because there's a very small number of very wealthy individuals who make a lot of money from stuff being overproduced. And Shein is the great example, who are now doing 300 seasons a year. Shein, if you study what they do, it's absolutely phenomenal. They have algorithms which are studying and scraping the internet to assess trends and what garments they feel are going to be in demand. And within 3 days of an algorithm making a decision, they have that item for sale and being delivered to customers. So 3 days is all it takes them to turn things from an idea into production. And it's ultra fast fashion. So that's a big part of the problem. But it's not just the fast fashion brands, it's not just the Sheins and the H&Ms and the Zaras. like Doc Martens, right? This amazing activist rebel brand. The majority of their leather for their shoes is coming from the parts of the Amazon that have been burned down illegally to raise cattle. So it's every single brand is culpable, and it's fundamentally a massive strive for profit under a capitalist model. So yeah, unless we address the overproduction, I think it's going to be hard to address the waste side on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe 3 days. That feels like you wouldn't even be able to get a garment from one end of the world to the other in that amount of time, so it's crazy. What about you, Jayne? What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Ronan, absolutely, and Shein are absolutely, I think, probably in the worst 5, not the top 5. But overall, you know, there's I think 30 to 40% overproduction, which is crazy, and that's not just the UK. I think that's what we're doing sort of globally. So that needs to be challenged. That has to stop. But I think, you know, what that does then is encourage regular people to just go out and think, what if there's 300 drops? You know, practically one a day. I need to keep buying that. I need to keep refreshing my wardrobe. I need to stay on top of the latest trend. And so it just feeds into our thinking in terms of especially the youth. And because they're so cheap, it just, you know, it's the price of a sandwich or, you know, whatever to buy a new item. So we have, you know, all of that has to change. I think it's about education. We've got so much more to do to educate people, starting off with children, because as they get to sort of 9 and 10, especially, they're starting to want more and more of those brands, and then that continues. And because life is often tough, you know, people want a treat, and if they can buy something new for a really low price, they're not quite thinking through the impact of that and the damage that they're doing to our planet, you know, and it is huge, it's vast, we don't know enough, we know more, I think, than some people, but there's, you know, we all need further education. So that's, you know, that's, I think the overproduction just leads to the massive demand from so many people, and I think that's where a lot of that waste is coming from, and because it's so cheap to buy, it's so cheap to then give away. And I think from the charity retail perspective, you know, the quality of that stuff is so poor that by the time it comes through to a charity shop, it's hard to resell it because its value is just so tiny, and therefore it goes into rag. And I remember when I joined the sector, which is about 30 years ago, you know, we used to go and see what happened to what was called the shoddy, so the items which had been rejected because the zip was bust or there was a button missing or whatever, and they were remade into new garments, you know, so the wool was sort of respun and made into jumpers or skirts or whatever. Or if it just couldn't, it would go into, you know, the shoddy that was the bus seats or the mattress fillings or whatever, or the garage wipes. But that was when there wasn't as much stuff. Now there is so much stuff that, you know, there isn't significant demand, and a lot of this stuff can be made so cheaply at the expense of the planet, at the expense of the population. You know, us, but worse, the people living in developing countries whose day job is to work often 7 days a week, really long hours for very low wages. And I saw that myself when I went and saw some of Save the Children's work in Bangladesh when I was working with them. And, you know, people are living and working in really, really tough conditions, and we are making that worse by buying the stuff that we don't need. You know, you say 11 kilograms, I think in the States they say it's closer to 30 kilograms, which is, you know, the sort of the size of a small child. You know, that's what is wasted every year. And so we have to have that collective conscious and that thinking that we're going to stop that. You know, we can change that. We need people to start with it, but, you know, there's a long way to go, but we know what we're talking about, and this is fact, so we need to all get behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Some really good points. I think lots of little changes do add up, don't they? You touched on it briefly there, but my next question for you, Jayne, was what happens when charity shops do get too much stock or they can't sell it? I've had a lot of people asking this in the past couple of weeks, and yeah, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about that.
I don't mind at all. So it can be an issue. I think it's not often an issue. I think it might be an issue if you go into one shop and they literally have been given so much stuff that it's a health and safety hazard and they can't take anything else in because it could cause some level of risk in that shop, and that kind of is fair enough. But usually on a high street there will be a minimum of 5 charity shops. There may be more than 10 charity shops. I think about phoning up beforehand. Think about dropping them an email or some form of contact to find out what they need. Is your stuff going to be welcome? And if it's not in that one shop, it absolutely will be in another shop. There are lots of charity shops that do have more space. There's loads on retail parks that are absolutely huge, and they can always generally take more stock. So I'd hate people to be put off by thinking, well, if I take it all the way in and then they're going to say no. It's easy to just throw it in the bin and add to that 11 kilograms of waste textiles that we're throwing away every year. So we can do stuff about it, and I think the Charity Retail Association does lots of stuff where getting people to think about where they donate, what they donate, how they donate. But on the whole, the charity shops welcome it. They really, really need your stock because they need that to make the difference. And for me, as somebody who's spent my career in working in charity retail, and the difference that your donations make, the average bag might be worth £50. That's £50 of stuff that your stuff that you don't need anymore, that somebody else will value, that will make a difference to them. But ultimately, it's the profit that goes directly back to the projects that charity supports. And the charity shop is the greenest and the most generous and the kindest retailer that we have in the UK. And we have more charity shops in the UK per head of population, I think, than anywhere else in the world, I imagine. We love our charity shops. They started in the UK. It's a really big thing, and in Ireland. And so it all makes such a massive difference. So everything you donate is going to be sorted by people who care about it. The volunteers who give their time, who learn new skills. They get so much from it. The people who are buying it get so much from it, and ultimately the charities and the benefits. It makes such a difference to the work that they can do. So it is the best form of retail therapy. So please don't feel that if you get told no, we can't take it, that you should stop doing it. There will be so many other charity shops who would love to take your donations. So it's a bit more sort of working together and thinking, well, how am I going to make the most of this?
Well, that's a really good point actually as well about just calling up before you go there. I've not thought of doing that before, but like you said, the charity shops are doing a lot of great stuff. I think the CRA have got a campaign about being more than just a shop in the community as well. So yeah, some really interesting points. What about you, Ronan? What do you think the resale platform plays in a more sort of circular textile economy and diverting textile waste?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, there's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. I don't think it's possible to consume in a system that prioritises profit over planetary or social good. So fundamentally, we need large-scale system change. I think that's the most important point. And that should be done through mass nationalisation of fossil fuel companies, mass taxation on the fashion companies. I mean, if we really wanted to, we had the political will, we could solve a lot of the challenges overnight. We could say we're not going to import anything into our marketplaces that aren't fully sustainable. Most of them aren't, and they'd stop coming in, and there'd be a massive crisis, and everyone would go crazy. But it's the best scenario is Greta Thunberg. I said we're having a debate about the house is on fire in front of us, and our conversation is should we use a foam fire extinguisher or a water fire extinguisher? Like we need action, and I think so I think that's the most important point. But I think actually it's about looking at, well, what would come in the future and how could we build a really sustainable model, and absolutely circularity has to play a core part in it. And we talk a lot with the charity partners that we have around what are you currently doing with your items and what's happening. So our existing charity partners are receiving up to 600 million unique garments a year, and again, that's only, we're working with about 4% of the charities in Britain, so the total volume is in the billions. And we know that the majority of that is being exported, so it's not being resold, it's being exported. And the reason it's being exported is the volume is so high, but it's also because most charity retailers are limiting themselves to where they sell that fashion, right? So if you're a charity retailer and you're getting all this fashion, you're just selling it in your stores. There's a reason why Shein is a mobile app and not a chain of shops. It's because you can sell a lot more volume online, and that's where people are used to buying things, right? So I think what we're starting to see gradually is charity retailers realise, well, actually, the majority of fashion sales are online. The vast majority of sustainable fashion demand, Depop, Vinted, Reuse, eBay, all those platforms are also online, so maybe it's time for us to really embrace online. And I think that that's a big part of the solution, is for the sources of the fashion and charity retail to embrace online. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to provide that technology or that solution to be able to say, here's how you can realistically do it. So resale is absolutely a crucial part of the solution going forward. And I think the nice thing about resale as well is there is something to be said about not pursuing or pushing the idea of just buying loads of stuff endlessly if you don't need it. But technically, if you think about it, you can go into a charity shop and spend a load of money, try it all on, and just donate back what you don't want, and then it's going to be resold again. And if we were doing that, actually the impact of that would be quite positive. The money would be staying in charity shops, you'd be engaging in circularity, and the charity shop would just get the item back. So I think actually there's no reason for us to say we need to vastly limit people's love of fashion or people's ability to try on new outfits or do new things. No, we just need to make it more accessible and actually make it more circular and give people more choices and more resale. And if we can but I think the final thing I'd say on this is that it's really important for us to not get distracted by some of the figures we hear around the growth in resale. So like, this is something I hear all the time, is people are like, oh, this is amazing, there's huge demand for resale, like there's going to be it's going to be bigger than the luxury fashion market within 2 years, which it is. More money is going to be spent on used fashion than all luxury items. But on the other side, we're selling more and more and more brand new fashion, and the demand for new fashion is also growing. So what's not happening is that we're not eating the fashion market's pie, and that's what we need to do. We need to lower and eat the amount of money that's being spent on fashion and turn that into reuse and resale. And I think if we can achieve that, then we start to see transformative change. And whether or not that can happen as a consumer, or we don't call them consumers at Thriftify, we prefer to call them circulators, a circulator demand, I don't know if that can be achieved. Like, I think it has to be a mix of activist movement, sustainable resale, social enterprises like us and many others, but also a little bit of legislative change, and also a bit of, well, actually, maybe we shouldn't allow fast fashion retailers to sell so much stuff for so cheap, because that's really bad for the environment. And I think the way to frame that in our heads is like the oil industry. The conversation around the oil industry is so different to the conversation around the fashion industry. And it shouldn't be. It should be the exact same conversation. Like, everybody is now talking about no more new oil infrastructure, or let's end fossil fuels. The vast majority of fashion is made from fossil fuels. Like, they're almost the exact same thing. So I think if we just reframe it in our heads and say, well, in the same way we want the fossil fuel industry to completely disappear, and actually that has to happen, the same is true of the fashion industry. Because they're completely intertwined, and they're actually one and the same. So I think, yeah, while we need to move to resale, and while there's lots of potential solutions out there, there is a little bit of reframing we need to do in the top line conversation.
Yes, definitely. I really like what you said there about, was it a circulator you said, not a consumer? So this just popped into my brain as well. So if we all move away from consuming too much and we move into sort of only resale, do you think that that's enough, or is there more needed? Is there more support needed from up top, like from the government, from the big dogs?
Yeah, well, I mean, am I going to be able to compete with Shein as a small social enterprise? Like, I'm just not, right? And no startup is. And I think we need to be really honest. Like, Zara, Shein, these major fashion groups, they have the budgets to be able to convince people to continue. Like, Kourtney Kardashian and Boohoo was like, I could never afford Kourtney Kardashian. Like, we wouldn't pay her if we could, but we could never, and we never will be able to afford someone to that extent. So it's just impossible to suggest that there is going to be a rapid, activist, social enterprise, startup-led movement that disrupts the fashion industry. Like, it could happen, and it would be amazing, but we have, as scientists are telling us, about 2 to 3 years to really avert the worst of the climate catastrophe. And is it going to happen in that time frame? I'm not so sure. So I think what we really need is a big focus on bringing people on the educational journey, raising awareness about the issues, which brings change, but as well as that, there needs to be really targeted, clever, direct action and campaigns that take on the big players, like Extinction Rebellion targeting Fashion Week in London and saying, let's shut down Fashion Week. Like, those are the kind of actions that also need to happen, which really just shake the system. Like, we really need to shake the system.
And I totally agree with you, Ronan. I think we've got to do so much more with that. And we need, we can all take individual action. We can all contact our MPs. We can all talk to policymakers. We can, we need those campaigns. We need to be involved in those. And we can make, we just, totally, you're absolutely right. We don't have the same voice as Boohoo. We can't shout as loudly, but the more we do events like this, the more we do things like Future Fashion Fair, which I know is in Manchester and connected to this, which is all about people like the people who are here today, who are putting their heart and soul into creating wonderful items which are upcycled, which are made of organic cottons, which aren't in any way connected to the Sheins and the Boohoos and the PLTs and all of that sort of stuff. But having that sort of collective action and doing that campaigning, but ultimately, voting with your card, your wallet, making the decisions to buy good stuff from good places, whether that's from here, whether that's from a charity shop, whether that's online through great things like Thriftify, etc. And there is that change. If you look at young people, I've got 3 kids who are 17 plus, and they don't buy that fast fashion. But they do go on Depop, and they do, they want to be part of this new trend. It's more than a trend, but this is how they want to do their purchasing. So they still want the feel-good factor of going out and buying something new and treating themselves to something. And they might not be able to afford the Patagonias and the really expensive brands, but they might be able to afford one on eBay or any sort of resale site. So there is hope, but it does require, I think, more activism. It's not just every buying decision being a conscious buying decision, but it's also about doing something that's proactive, and whether it's doing something around London Fashion Week or any of them, but it's taking action, and it's making your voice heard, and it's sharing that, and it's educating and informing other people so that they join with all of you, all of us.
And I think another really interesting point to build on that is there's only one truth, right? Like, there's not multiple versions of the truth. And in Ireland, you might be aware of some of the amazing social change we've achieved in the last decade, right? So first we had a referendum on marriage equality. The first country in the world to have a public referendum on whether or not people should be able to marry whoever the hell they want, right? And the opinion polls just showed that was going to lose. And then there was a massive campaign. And what did the campaign consist of? It was just conversations. millions and millions of conversations, door-to-door conversations of bringing people on the educational journey. And then we had another referendum on abortion rights, one of the most restrictive countries in the world when it came to abortion. And then we had a referendum which more people actually supported liberalisation of abortion than supported same-sex marriage. So these educational movements built on each other, and I think that that's a really important point, and the same is true in any big social changes. What's the educational arc that we're bringing people on, and how quickly can we let people know what the truth is? And I think what's really exciting is that that could happen really, really quickly. You know, we can reach tipping points where suddenly what feels like nobody knows now about the damage of the fast fashion industry, in a year from now we could be saying, well, what the hell just happened over the last year? How did that suddenly happen? And it's because it's that word of mouth conversation and spread really, really quickly. So I think that that's a really exciting aspect, and it's so important to have these events and these conversations. These are such an important part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Some amazing points there from both of you. So my next question is about the growth. I saw a stat earlier today that said the second-hand market is expected to grow by 127% in the next 4 years. So what are your thoughts on that? Firstly, why is it expected to grow that much? And my second question is, do you think that this collective consciousness has got the potential to sort of shift in the wrong direction in any way? For example, charity shops and retail platforms partnering with fast fashion brands. Who wants to go first with that one?
I mean, there's a lot to say on it.
It's quite a loaded question.
No, it's good. There's 2 questions in there. I mean, I think the first one is, I bring it back to the fossil fuel industry. Would you, as an organisation, enter a partnership with a fossil fuel company? And if the answer to that is yes, okay. If the answer is no, why is the answer different if the partnership is with a fast fashion brand? And unless you can convince me, or yourself, of the answer to that question, then you probably need to be asking some serious questions. And we do know that there are some charity retailers who do have partnerships with major fast fashion companies, and what they will say is it's better that we resell this stock than it go into landfill. But my response would be, what capability do you then have in supporting the starting point of the problem, which is overproduction? And are you propping up and enabling and facilitating them to do that? As opposed to saying, we're not going to do this anymore, we're going to pull back and we're going to do a press release to say, actually, these guys are super unsustainable and it doesn't support us because we want climate justice, and they don't. So I think there's work for us to do, and in any situation like this where we're talking about major social change, I think it's really about being courageous, and I think that's what will be remembered. Like, there's an opportunity now to be on the right side of history, but that the window and time frame for that is closing very quickly. Like, there isn't 10 years left to be on the right side of history, like there's 3 or 4. And I think it's up to every organisation to really reflect on that and say, are we going to be on the right side of history for this? And are we really going to be remembered as an organisation that made a really strong effort here? So I think I understand why there's a lot of charity retailers and other organisations who do work with fashion companies, but I think ultimately it's a plaster over a much more systemic problem that it actually needs deeper addressing.
I think it's a sort of a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. This is a way of generating fashion that is going to appeal to young people. You know, maybe that's something we can do and bring more young people through our stores. My personal take is exactly the same as yours, Ronan. I don't think it's why people come into charity shops is to see racks and racks of some of those great big fast fashion brands. I think it takes away from what charity shops are about. But I think, for me, those charity retailers need to be really thinking about what messages they're giving out by promoting those brands. And I think you can kind of see that in the past, and I think still happening, is what are the choices when you've got that 30 to 40% overproduction? Are you going to incinerate them? Are you going to add to the environmental catastrophe that fast fashion is by burning them? Are you going to throw them in the desert, chuck them in the sea? You know, what are you going to do with them? And of course, none of us want that. But at the same time, putting them straight into charity shops and doing that every time is, I think, taking away from what a charity shop is all about. I can see if it might be a one-off, there was a cancelled order for all of these items. They've been made, the cotton's been grown, the dyes have been used. But if it's an ongoing thing and it just supports that ongoing overconsumption, then I think that to me, there is some greenwashing there, especially if the manufacturing company is using this as a way of promoting their green credentials. So I think it's something that we need to be really wary of as a sector. Of course, we always want to bring new stuff, new ideas, new ways of bringing new consumers into the shops, but at the same time, not at the price of the planet.
Yes, I do agree with that one. I think without the support from the government as well, it's going to be really hard to sort of make that change as well and get people to, like you said, it all starts with the production, doesn't it? It needs to stop being so much production.
Yeah, and I think the whole thing about lobbying the government is really important. Lobbying all policymakers. We've got a question. Fashion is the second biggest polluter. We've got to get people to see that and to do something and to, as I said earlier, sort of vote with every purchase that you make, so that overproduction slows right down and stops, and ultimately it sees the end of this phase. When I was a 20-year-old, there wasn't that choice, there wasn't that availability. We all have plenty to wear, and there is plenty to wear. That the mountain that we're talking about in this, we have to do more, and all the time. And so the government part, the lobbying part, all of that, and the promoting events like this so much more, so that people can really see and be informed and make good decisions.
Yeah, and actually I think that one of the biggest topics is the greenwashing that's happening at the moment. But there's lots of reasons why greenwashing is positive. Bear with me, right? Well, one main reason. It's purely strategic and from an activist perspective. If you're trying to take somebody on, the worst thing is when they just ignore you. Because they realise you're not having any effect. And we're just ignoring this campaign. We don't need to do anything. We can just keep doing everything the same way we were. What's happening at the moment is massive marketing campaigns. They're investing millions in these marketing campaigns and influencer partnerships, and it's because the campaigns are working. So it's a positive from a campaigning perspective. It's not, obviously it's terrible and they shouldn't be doing it, but there's a reason they're doing it, and the reason they're doing it is because the campaigns that are highlighting the negative impact are working. And young people in particular are learning and going on an educational journey. But you can't come back from an educational journey. You can't get educated and then get uneducated. So the greenwashing is symptomatic of them trying to stay relevant. And what that means, I think, for those of us who are on the other side of the argument, is to take a lot of kind of credence from that and say, actually, this is great, let's keep going. And let's then target the greenwashing campaigns. So there's nothing they can do because it's all lies, right? If someone lies, the more you lie, the worse, the easier it becomes for an activist to unpick the lies, the more you tangle yourself up. And that's what's happening now, is the fashion companies are continuing to add lie upon lie upon lie. So they're giving activists more fuel. And what we need to be doing is taking the likes of this campaign with Boohoo's campaign with Kourtney Kardashian and unpicking it. And one of the panels earlier, one of the participants made the point that of Boohoo's 40,000 products that they'll make this year, 47 are part of this campaign with Kourtney Kardashian. So all you need to do is actually look into what's happening in reality and then unpick it, because it's all a lie. So I think there's a lot to be said for not actually being really afraid. We are making progress. We are making really tangible progress because they're fighting us. And the more they fight us, the more extreme they get, the better. Because we're backing them into a corner and we're bringing people on that educational journey. The more desperate they get, the more silly the campaigns will get. And the more easier it will be to call them out. So we just have to keep going. Even though we're this tiny, tiny pin in the beast's side, we just need to keep poking. It's like death by 1,000 pin pricks.
So really, really interesting point there, thank you. I'm going to go back to the previous stat I mentioned about the growth in the second-hand market. What do you think, so if we carry on as we are, I think it's quite scary to sort of think about the amount of clothing waste that there will be. So what do you both think is needed to change? I'm not saying the growth is a bad thing in any way, but what is needed to change to prevent that waste from happening? Should we start with you, Jayne?
Well, I think from a charity retail perspective, it's about us as within the sector and you as consumers and customers of charity retail, whether it's online or whether it's in high street stores, is just making more decisions to buy second hand, because buying second hand is the greenest way to refresh your wardrobe. It's better for the people, it's better for the planet, and it's brilliant for the charities that you're supporting. So making more decisions to buy good quality stuff from charity shops that's pre-loved can play an absolutely massive part. And we see, in the States, the sale of those sort of pre-loved items, the percentage growth is bigger than the percentage growth in new fashion. So percentage growth-wise, we are definitely doing the right thing. We're on the right road. I think it's doing more of that all the time. Because if you're refreshing your wardrobe with pre-loved items, you're not going to be buying the fast fashion. So it's about those sorts of decisions. It's also about buying things that you want, that you know you're going to need, that you know you're going to wear a minimum of 30 times. If you're not going to wear it enough, don't buy it, because otherwise you will be discarding it again, and you will be contributing to the problem that we're talking about. So it's making decisions about what you need, what you really want, where you're going to buy it from. I'm not saying just buy from charity shops, but because there's lots of great other places to buy, like all of the fabulous stores here. So it's doing that. But the more we make those positive, good decisions about where we buy from, the more it hits the fast fashion brands, and the more they start to shrink. So it's a long way to go. But I think those sorts of things for me are the 127% growth. I think you can celebrate that if it's people making those very sensible, wise, but also hopefully good, fun decisions, and going home feeling ultra satisfied. You've not just got a new item, but you know that this is not damaging the planet as much as it would be if you were making those alternative decisions.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I can see a change in attitudes from sort of when I was growing up. Charity shopping didn't seem as trendy like we were sort of talking about before. So I think brands do respond to a purse, don't they? If we all stopped shopping suddenly in Boohoo, things would change, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was a shop manager for Oxfam 30 years ago, people would come into the shop and they would be a little bit embarrassed. There was that stigma that you're talking about. They would say, "Oh, don't give me an Oxfam carrier bag. I've brought my own carrier bag." And now it's completely the opposite, and it's wonderful. And people are going, "Guess where I got this from? Guess, look at the brand, look at the name, but look at the price. Look at what I paid for it. I got it from the X charity shop, or I bought it from X charity online." And people are proud of that, and they know that it's good. It's good for them. It's good for the planet, and it's great. It's great for the charities. And I think the other thing that we're all really aware of now is the whole affordability crisis. And again, that's where it's really important for people to be understanding that buying from a charity is a really good place to buy. And yes, you'll get wonderful stuff, and you'll also get it much cheaper than you would anywhere else.
Definitely. What do you think's brought that change on then? That sort of change in behaviours with second-hand shopping?
I think partly because charity shops have upped their game a lot in the last 10 years. I think especially. I think they have invested more in staff, in training their staff. I think they've invested more in the look and the feel of their shops. I think they've welcomed people from all sectors. You've got charities that specifically target younger people. You've got shops that are all about books. You've got you've got a whole range. Furniture stores, superstores. They're responding more, I think, to the customer needs. I think there's been much more of a professional approach in that time. About 12 or 13 years ago, I worked with Mary Porter's when she did the Mary Queen of Charity Shops TV series. I was head of retail at Save the Children, and she chose one of those shops to work with. And you know, that was a project that got loads of media coverage, and I think it really helped make people think differently about what they were donating, and that charity shops would really value high-end stuff as much as sort of high street fashion, and they would get the right price, and you could trust them to do that. And it was also about, you know, making the look and feel be something that people wanted to positively choose to shop in. So I think the last 10 years especially, we've seen a huge shift in the way charity shops present themselves, both on the high street and certainly online, especially in the last sort of 2 to 3 years. What about you?
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely a part of it, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's also a big impact from Gen Z, who, when you look at kind of the research in terms of who they are and how they express themselves, they're much less likely to follow trends. So individual expression, gender boundaries, diversity issues, like they're the most educated generation. They're also more of them are in counselling and therapy than any other generation, so they're also the most under pressure generation. And I think that kind of what that leads to then is a generation that are much more prone to individual expression, and that plays really well into used and charity shops, right? So I think that's a part of it. But I think absolutely, you know, the typical charity shop experience has been absolutely elevated, you know, and some of the, like Shelter and some of the other charity retailers, shops I walk into, like they're just absolutely amazing how they've merchandised them and how they've laid the shop out. I think that's really important. It's obviously had a big impact as well.
I think we've also seen a huge increase in the number of young people volunteering in charity shops and becoming paid managers, and that's really changing. So the charities have better access to young people's thinking, to Gen Z thinking, and you know, getting them to do the window displays, in-store displays, valuing individual items, saying actually this does have a future. You know, we can sell this and we can get a good price for it. So getting a broader cross section of input into all of the decisions about how you run a charity shop, and that's one of the great things about the sector is, you know, anyone can sort of apply to be a volunteer, can find a role in the shop. You know, these days it's not just you work behind the till or you sort stock. You know, you could be a social media volunteer, you can be a visual merchandising specialist, you can be an events person. There's loads of different things that are going on, rather than just, you know, we sell old stuff. You know, it's much broader than that. So I think, you know, charities are really working hard to encourage young people, encourage a broad range of people to come and play their part, and get all the benefits of working in a shop as well, and learning new skills and making new friends. You know, so I think being more representative of the community, I think that's played quite a big part in the changes we've seen recently.
Definitely, it's really a nice fun pastime, isn't it? You know, charity shopping and sort of finding things for not too much money. So my final question is, it was just in my head and it's gone. What sort of extra support do you think is needed in your roles to help stop waste generally across the charity and resale sectors? So this could be sort of government support. What's missing?
Well, that government support is missing. You know, it absolutely is missing. So again, like I said earlier, I think it's up to all of us to be thinking that, to be taking, you know, to taking action, to challenge that, to be informing other people. I think you know, we do need support. We are I think feel like this is a growing body of people who are really committed to making a difference and changing the way we view fashion. But it is hard. You know, it's hard to do it as we are. We are, you know, Gen Z is absolutely behind us more than any other generation has been in the past, and that's absolutely wonderful to see. And we, you know, so there is hope, and we can see change. but we can't do it alone. So we do need to keep sort of supporting Charity Retail Association campaigns and lobbying members of Parliament and other people of influence to make a difference, to see what's going on and to play their part.
Yeah, I think there's a lot across the entire remit of whether it's charity retail or to people in this room in terms of what we can all do and the role we can play. I think there's probably an educational journey for charity retailers themselves to perhaps be engaged in and letting them know the kind of the stats and the figures about just how interested Gen Z are in their offering and in terms of what's happening online and in what that opportunity could be and in the fact that people actually really do, like, we're all sick of the big marketing campaigns. Like, we want genuine, good organisations to be running the place. And these are the best organisations that exist. And instead of being looked at as the addition or the last thing on the high street, they should be the heart of the high street and the heart of our shopping and fashion journey. So I think there's an educational journey perhaps for us to bring charity retailers on and say, people want you to lead this, step up and you can do it. So I think that's a big part. I think, for the general public as well, I think the climate conversation sometimes leads to mass apathy, and I think that's really detrimental. And I think there's a role on activists and those of us in calling for action to consistently offer hope and say, we have to do everything that we can and we have to stay active. And even if that means doing tiny little actions, it's important to stay consistent and to keep taking action. Because every degree of warming is going to have catastrophic impact. So the more we can do to limit climate change, the better. And I think for me, what I find is sometimes I get burnt out if I'm working on stuff that I'm not passionate about. So it might be really important from a climate perspective or a fashion perspective or a work perspective, but actually it's the stuff I'm really passionate about that gives me energy that I can then go and do more of. So the oceans and the sea swimming is something I'm really passionate about, and then that gives me the energy to get involved in campaigns about microfiber pollution or the pollution in the oceans. And the other thing I love to do is write in my own spare time. And I love, this is a bit sad, but I love going on Instagram and slagging off like oil executive CEOs and looking at Instagram accounts of the greenwashing campaigns and just writing something really sarcastic or telling the truth. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of our voice. Our voice is so powerful, and the more we use it, the better. So I'm constantly on the CEO of BP's Instagram page. He has his own personal Instagram page where he's always talking about their investment in electric. He just bought an electric car. And I just make the most sarcastic, ridiculing comments that I know won't be deleted, but they get so many likes, and that gives me, I get great fun out of that. I don't know if it has an impact, right, but I think it's important to consistently use our voice and tell the truth and call out the huge amount of bullshit that's out there. So that's me, that's what I find passionate. It's a bit sad, but I think if there's other stuff that people find passionate, then it's about connecting what you're passionate with the cause, because environmentalism and the climate catastrophe touches every single aspect of everything in the world. So whatever it is you're passionate about, there is a way of connecting that with taking action. And on the governmental or large-scale legislative change arena, I just cannot understand how we allow the advertising industry as it is to exist. It's just horrific. All of the evidence suggests never mind the lies, but the psychological damage it does primarily to young girls is horrific, and it's been researched to death, and we can point the finger at the fashion industry and say, you guys are causing this. I just don't understand how it's still allowed for them to get away with the kind of toxic advertising. So that should just be banned. We should just stop it. That's one change, and there's a lot of other changes like that need to be made. But I think ultimately it's going to be individuals and a small group of individuals. And this is the last thing I'd say. It's never the majority that change things. The majority change things after the fact. Like Martin Luther King, I gave this stat earlier, never went above 35% approval in opinion polls. The vast majority of people didn't support Martin Luther King. And the same is true for every social movement. The suffragettes spat on and attacked in the streets. Every single social movement has been a minority until it wasn't. So we're a minority now, but that's okay. like it's absolutely fine if your friends and family aren't with us on the agenda. It's like, okay, I'm just going to stop trying to convince them and just going to go and do it anyway because it's a minority that change things.
Yeah, thank you. I really liked your call to action there with the oil giant trolling on Instagram. So, well, that's the end of my questions. So thank you both so much. I know waste can be quite a scary topic, but I think what you're both doing is really amazing and helping to divert so many thousands of tonnes every year. But I'm going to ask the audience now to see if any of you have got any questions. We do have a microphone. So has anyone got anything to ask Jayne or Ronan?
I wanted to ask about fast fashion coming into charity shops, not through like partnerships or anything, but just because it's such a big industry, how that could be combated, and making sure charity shops stay differentiated.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I always feel disappointed when I go into a charity shop and I see racks full of those fast fashion brand names. It's really hard because so much of it is bought and then donated. So you know the likelihood is that a really good chunk of what's donated in that shop will be from one of those brands. It is only the bits that are saleable that do actually make it onto the shop floor that team feel has a value still. So there is the big question, do you keep accepting that and selling it rather than, it never reaching the shop floor? If it doesn't reach the shop floor, it is recycled. It does have some sort of future, but not in terms of being reworn. So so there's a real challenge there, and I would really love to see charity shops that promote themselves as places where there is no fast fashion for sale in this shop. There is nothing better for me than going in and finding really lovely pieces that that didn't come from one of those, and having stores full of those items would, I think, be a great way to market them, those charity shops. But I know it's a massive challenge just because it's a huge chunk, and what's going to happen to it otherwise. So I know that some charity shops will sort of differentiate and segment their stores so that there are some that will sell more of that, and there'll be maybe stores which are sort of discount stores where everything is a lower price and a higher turnover, sort of reflecting where the stock came from, and then other stores which are more boutique-y, which have got a higher sort of price point on each of those labels. But it is there, and I think it will continue. They will continue to be on the rails, unfortunately. But I think getting more sort of segmenting would be a good thing to help those customers who don't want to be seeing that stuff as they're going through the rails.
I'd love to see a boycott. I'd love to see a large-scale boycott of Boohoo, for example, and with a simple demand: stop talking about sustainability until you commit to lowering production. That's it. Unless we stop production, nothing else is going to change. And I think I think we're ready for that now. We can't. It's very hard to boycott Shell or BP because it's not like we go out and buy oil, right? It's around us. It powers the infrastructure. So you can't necessarily I'm going to switch my lights off until BP stop making oil. That's not very practical. But it is practical to say we're organising a boycott against, and pick a brand, pick the biggest brand in the news at the moment, and just boycott them, and perhaps to get charity retailers on board with that and turn stuff away and create a big campaign about the whole thing. And whether or not it's successful or not, again, it's bringing people on that educational journey. People saying, why are the hell are charity shops boycotting Boohoo? What the hell is this about? It would bring people on an educational journey. And I think it's those kind of campaigning pieces that are really important. And there's, again, it puts that charity retailer at the heart of the conversation. And there's so much room for that kind of clever strategic engagement in the conversation from charity retailers that I think we haven't even scratched the surface of.
Okay, I think we've got 2 more questions in about 5 minutes, so who's the next one?
I just had a question. I think you briefly spoke about it, but I wanted to know what you thought about, I think PLT have just started their own resale platform, and I wondered whether you thought that was greenwashing and just people justifying buying those items because they're like, oh, I can just resell it, or whether so basically, do you think that's a positive thing, or do you think that's just helping people justify buying PLT items?
I think it's greenwashing, and I think I can't believe that those items have any life left in them. So for me, the costs involved, the financial and the environmental costs involved in getting those items back and then sending them out again in the post to somebody else. I think it's just greenwashing. I can't see that it will work and it will last. So I think in some of the higher end brands that's also happening. It's happening across the fashion world and beyond. IKEA have been doing that, and I think that might have already come to the UK, but certainly across Europe, IKEA have been encouraging people to sort of bring things back and then resell them on. So yeah, for me, it's just greenwashing. I think they're just jumping on the bandwagon.
I agree. I think so. The company that's powering Pretty Little Things, technology that does that, is a company called Reflaunt, and they've just raised substantial investment here in Britain, and they power that resale technology for lots of other brands as well. And I've spoken to the founders of that company on quite a few occasions, and their perspective is that less waste is the answer, right? And they genuinely believe that they're having an impact on sustainability, and we've debated it. I don't share the opinion with them, and we've had those tough conversations, because ultimately what's happening is PLT and Boohoo, the conversation that's happening in their rooms isn't changing. So the conversation that we don't see, right, is about how much money are we making. And it's the same with the oil companies. And again, I'm going to bring it back to the oil companies. The oil companies will not change unless they're forced to change. And we can just forget about goodwill. It's just not going to happen. They're built on greed and corruption. And these organisations are the same. And the reason they're engaging in these resale technology platforms is to continue to prioritise the bottom line. So they are not going to change. And regardless of what they do, as soon as you dig into it, you'll see that it's not genuine. Like Kourtney Kardashian had 47 products out of 40,000. And one of the other stats that Sophie made this morning, of one of the garments in Kourtney Kardashian's thing that they're calling sustainable is 0.05% organic cotton. Like, it's a complete lie, and it's a complete fabrication to protect their bottom line. And I think what we need to do is just withdraw from that conversation and say, we're not going to have a conversation. We wouldn't have a conversation with Shell. I wouldn't get into a conversation with Shell about sustainability. I'd get into a conversation with a group of activists who are going to shut down their office. And I think that's the kind of place we need to be. It's like, we're just going to withdraw from that conversation, and we're going to engage in the opposite conversation, which is how do we shut this thing down.
Thank you, Ronan. We've just got 1 minute left and one more question, so sorry, really quickly.
No, it's fine. I just wondered what your thoughts are on like the film and TV industry, because I'm a costume maker and there's a lot of waste in that, and we have like bags and bags of scraps that we don't really know what to do with. Like scrap stores won't take them anymore, and then obviously when you're buying for a show, they buy ASOS and Boohoo and everything like that. I just wondered what you thought could be done about that kind of thing.
Can you give them to the brilliant people who are here, who are creating all sorts of...
thinking about maybe like trying to sell it to people, but
yeah.
we don't really know.
And I think there's a huge market in that. I think there's huge opportunities. So I would say, just proactively go out and look for those. Then depending on what they are, charity shops can be amazing places to find, all sorts of delights. The Charity Retail Association do an event every year where they have, awards for unusual items that are donated and resold, and some of the stuff that I'm sure you come across would probably fit the bill for those awards. But so from a charity retail perspective, I'd say make contact with a charity retailer that's based near to where you're based, and look for whether there's opportunities that way. But if not, maybe working with fashion colleges and maybe working with the sorts of people who are here, because it's just amazing, isn't it? When it's like generations before us were you know, when they had a dress and it got too small, it was passed on to somebody else, and then scrap material was taken out and something else was made with it, and it went through generation, you know, went through families like that, and we've got to make sure that that happens. Now, the bag that I've got that's here is made from, you know, scrap waste from a university fashion college, and they, you know, so they have people who remake things into really wonderful items, which I love that. I love that there's a story behind it, and so finding ways to sort of communicate where that came from as well really helps the customer have a you know, a really fulfilling experience in buying that product.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did a partnership with the costume department of Normal People, and we received 35 massive bags of all of the clothing that had been used on Normal People, the TV show. I'm sure everyone knows about it, right? Yeah. But obviously they keep all the main character costumes in storage in case they need to do a movie or they need the outfits. Well, we got these massive bags and we distributed them to the charity shops, and then we resold them, and we were like, great, when can we do the press release and when can we talk about this? And they were like, oh no, you can't do that. We're like, why? This is such an amazing opportunity to talk about how sustainable you've been, but they wouldn't allow us to do it. They wouldn't allow us to celebrate the fact that, you know, you've been sustainable. Instead of throwing all this stuff in the bin, it's coming back into charity retail. And the reason for that is because it's so new to them and it's so nervous. But what we've done is we've worked with the costume designers, and then for conversations with friends, which obviously wasn't as good as Normal People, but it was still a big production. They sourced all the stuff from charity shops. So I think that was a really fantastic thing we felt internally. Like, it didn't have a massive impact, but for us it was like, wow, we've changed how that costume department thought and how they engage in actually sourcing products. Because they were like, oh no, it would take too long to go into the charity shops to buy all this stuff. And we were like, yeah, well, it's all on the website, so just filter by size and you can find it all. And they were like, oh really? And we're like, yeah, you can buy all of it in bulk in an hour sitting on your laptop. And they did, which was absolutely amazing. And then the charities benefited from that. And now after, we haven't gotten it yet, but we're going to take all that clothing back and give it back to the charity shops. So it's come from a charity shop, it's going to go back to a charity shop. And I think it's those kind of partnerships. Now, again, they won't let us talk about it. I think this is going out online, so I might be in trouble. But, sorry, everyone in Normal People and Conversations with Friends. But I think it's that kind of educational journey that if we can engage people on, is really, really impactful. And hopefully, after we get the stuff back from Conversations with Friends, what we're going to do is really push them and say, come on guys, like, this is something that needs to be spoken about, this is something really positive, and you have an opportunity to bring the industry with you and lead that conversation. So I think it's little things like that can be really powerful. If one person does it, it gives permission to everybody else to do it. It's just, nobody wants to be the first sometimes.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for joining today.